in
It is exactly 8:38 a.m. This is News and Views right here on Salam Media. And next on the show, we speak with Yasser Louati. He is a French human rights and civil liberties activist to talk to us about the brutality of the French police against the Algerians. This was at Algeria's Arab Cup celebrations. And I think that Yasser and the rest of the world are viewing this as a human rights and civil liberties situation. Let's look at how this all started and where to from here about these ongoing brutalities against uh, Arab people in the people living in Europe. Assalamu alaikum, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
And to you as well. So, talk to us about the situation that played out at this football match. How did it start, and were there very many casualties after the police attacked the Algerian people, the merrymakers?
Well, we have to remember that the demonstration in favor, or the celebration after Algeria's win in the Arab Cup final, uh, was something that should have been celebrated like any other person could. But this happened in a country already that has expressed its pain and hatred of Algerians, Moroccans, Tunisians, etc. So much so that for the past few months, when the anti-separatism law, which is specifically targeting Muslims to prevent them from organizing and acting as citizens, uh, government or members of the Senate, the higher chamber of legislation, they attempted to ban the raising of foreign flags during marriages. Because to them, we have to remind our audience and listeners that France hates the Algerian flag because it is a flag that reminds the French politicians that France was defeated and that Algerians won their independence and that to this day Algerians are still proud of being Algerians. Now, having said that, the images we have seen are gruesome. And honestly, I was expecting that because I knew the situation was ripe for the police to wait for the Algerian fans to march on the Champs-Élysées and for them and for the police to charge them. Now, how it started, we still do not know. Now, historically speaking, there were always elements of, how can I say, disturbances in football celebrations. It happens all the time. Even some stadiums got shut in France because of that. But to see the police brutally assault these fans like criminals, this says again that we not only live in a country where the police is a racist institution, but that the brutality of this institution is still unchecked.
Now, we know that on the 11th of December, the French police also fired tear gas at about 200 Algerians who were celebrating their home country's victory over Morocco in the FIFA Arab Cup. In addition to that, um, Arab and Algerian fans that celebrated these wins very proudly raised Algerian and Palestinian flags in French cities. Do you think that might be one of the reasons, their full support at a soccer match, showing solidarity to Palestinian people and the Palestinian people's plight?
I'm not sure about that because the Palestinian question didn't come into debate. It mostly had to do with look at those Arabs, look at those immigrants disturbing our peace. No, but when white people celebrate, victory in football, that's always welcome. But it is true that since you mentioned the Palestinian question, it is true that both the Tunisian team and the Algerian team sent a powerful message when they both raised the Palestinian flag. And of course, France is hostile to the liberation of Palestine and hostile to the Palestinian resistance and has sided with Israel through all its massacres against Palestinians. But to come back to our point on this celebration, this really has to do with the deep-rooted hatred France has for Algerians, but also for its own citizens that are of Algerian descent when they express their pride in being of Algerian descent.
Finally, so what do Algerian and Moroccan and other Arab people living in France and the rest of Europe, what do they do about these very Islamophobic tendencies and behaviors towards them?
Well, I mean, like, French Muslim citizens are only asking for one thing, to be treated as citizens and to be viewed as equal to the rest of the population. But unfortunately, in France, this is still this is almost a long-term battle because as we have new generations of French Muslims who are born and raised here, who have their kids here, who in turn grew up as well, they of course become part of the social fabric. But to this day, in the national novel, in the national narrative, these people are not French, even if they have been in French for 2, 3, 4 generations. And this means that these people have still to organize, and that the battle, unfortunately, will be bitter because policymakers in France, just as they have or they did in the colonies, cannot accept to be equal to blacks and Arabs. And that's why many laws, and the latest one being passed a few months ago, many laws have been passed to prevent Muslims, to prevent Arabs, to prevent people of the banlieue from being able to set up powerful organizations to challenge the government politically and in court under the disguise of political Islam. And to finish, what they mean by political Islam is that we do not want Muslims to be citizens. They're only believers. They pray, they fast Ramadan, they pay zakat, they go to Mecca, but that's it. If they want to act as citizens, we will crush them. And I hope that Muslims will realize that all other minorities in France went through this. Jews, Spaniards, Italians, Poles, they have all been oppressed by the French regime, and now it is the turn of Muslims to make their way into French citizenry.
Okay, Yasser Louati, thank you indeed for talking with us. We make dua that your position or all non-European people living in Europe and the rest of the world, that the situation does change. But we do know that apartheid is alive in the Western world. That was Yasser Louati, French human rights and civil liberties activist, talking to us about, obviously, the separatist uh, tendencies by the French people towards minority groups, very especially Algerians and Moroccans in France. Stay with us. It is 8:46. We'll be back in a minute or two to talk with Sheikh Bilal Ismail. He is the director of the Imam Development Program. This is News and Views right here on Salam Media.
Every 60